Hello and welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast. My next guest is co-founder and CEO of Salesflare, an intelligent CRM built for SMBs selling to B2B, most popular with agencies and fast-growing startup companies. It's a CRM that fills itself, which is great. It's a top rated on platforms like G2 because it's easy to use and its automation features. So we're going to find out more about that. So welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast, Jeroen Corthout.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So in light that we're all experiencing this global pandemic, I'm sure there's been lots of adaptations that you have done internally, but also things that you've seen with your customers as well. So perhaps you could talk to that. What's your experience been in the way that either you or your customers have had to adapt and change?
Yeah, that's I must say for us it's mostly an internal thing, and for our customers very much an external thing, at least in the part that we help them with. We've always done remote sales, remote selling since like when we were a year into Salesflare, I think, because our customers come from all over the world. They're not just in Belgium where we are, but they're mainly actually in the US, in the UK, that's our second market, all over Europe, Australia. So we covered the whole globe there. So for us, it was mostly not being together with the team that made a big difference. We had to work a lot on streamlining our internal communication because we were before more heavily relying on being in the same room. That's always something we found important because we believed that it would we were close to each other, that would make us communicate better. And it's actually only when we moved to the remote setting that we understood that it wasn't actually so great, that a lot of the communication was so like accidental, and that we started organizing ourselves more for actually having the communication flow properly through the organization. That means that we made changes to how we do meetings, how we take notes in meetings, how we spread the conclusions of meetings, what kind of meetings we do with how many people, all those kind of things. For our customers, the difference is mostly in the fact that a lot of them were still doing meetings with people, like actual live meetings, which is something that is a bit hard to imagine right now after being almost 6 months in this pandemic, at least in the Western world. If you actually type remote selling in Google, chances are big that the post I wrote about it comes up first. It's something we have quite some experience with, so we immediately started helping other companies with doing it. There's a few things that are essential there, but I don't know how far you would like me to go into details.
Well, yeah, it'd be useful to hear, the highlight of what you think is essential.
Yeah, it comes in different parts of the pipeline. So first of all, companies need to rethink a bit the way they generate leads. There's companies falling back on conferences and events, and they might personally go to places. These are things you need to change. So what helps a lot of companies is defining their target audience much better, much tighter, like as if they're sort of niching down, and then start looking for these people online instead of where they would previously look for those offline. See where these exact people are located online and try to be in that place. That might mean getting on podcasts, that might mean organizing webinars, although a lot of people are getting quite tired of the webinars by now, but that might mean engaging in online communities. There's all kinds of possibilities there, but what is essential is to first be even more precise as to what your target market is. Otherwise, it's very hard. Also, in a market that is sort of in a downturn, it's good to place your bets on your on the safest return, I would say. So your exact target market. Then what I see a lot of companies do is making a sort of shift to digital, or modernizing the software they're using. At least that's what we see a lot when people come to us. There's still a lot of people not really managing the middle of the pipeline very well. And in terms of sales follow-up, there's huge opportunities there. Imagine people having this very simplistic sheets. This is a company, this is the contact, this is when we last touched them. This is very time consuming and prone for error, especially if you forget to update the system, or some information is not in there. There's always things getting lost. It's also very disconnected from your communication system, which makes it hard and which makes it more work. So definitely there's big opportunities for improvements. And then maybe a third main area is shifting to online meetings. By now, most people understand it, kind of, I think. But doing it well with a few tips. Try to always turn your video on. It might seem obvious, but there's still quite some people that don't. Try to be a bit more personal in conversations. There's no need for that whole formal sit in the lobby, being picked up, get a coffee, wear a suit, and all that. Everybody's at home, so you can take that opportunity to be more human with people, because in the end there's sort of two screens between you and your prospect or customer. So the more you're personable and that radiates through these screens, the better the connection you can build. And that's what we sort of have to work with when building relationships nowadays. So I would really advise to try to be as personable as possible there.
So tell me more about the unique features of Salesflare. What makes it uniquely better than what else is available to your customers?
Yeah, so when you look at it purely in terms of features, you might not immediately see it, but you need to look at the thing as a whole, because the thing that we built, the software, is built in such a way that it sits on top of the existing data you already have as a salesperson or as somebody who's doing sales. So most CRMs require a whole lot of manual data input and are actually dependent on you to be successful. So if you fill out the CRM perfectly, like you're this sort of perfect data input robot, then the system will work for you because all the information is there. You can find it there, and that way you can also use it to follow up your customers. Reality is that nobody is that disciplined, or it's mostly a matter of discipline and obviously time and energy investment. And CRMs almost always fail. It might not be in the exact beginning, but it might be that in the beginning you're very enthusiastic at keeping track of everything perfectly. But then your sales start rolling in and you start feeling successful, and then you're like, I don't really need to fill this in, and then it's when things start going wrong and the system crashes. That's sort of what we felt 6 years ago when we were following up leads for a software company of ours, and when we started thinking like, this is stupid, and nobody ever thought of fixing the software. So we thought, what if we build software that actually sits on top of your data that you already have, like your emails, their email signatures, who you're emailing with, who you're meeting with in your calendar, stuff in your phone, stuff in social media, company databases, email tracking, web tracking, and sort of pull that all together. So that if you say, I want to sell to that company, that Salesforce says, oh, I see you know this person and this person there. Do you want to add them? You say yes. And then I say, well, we see that you exchange these emails, had these meetings, and there's these phone calls in your phone. And we found that phone number in the email signature, and we added that for you. And this is a LinkedIn profile. that this is organized for you. And then on top of that, we actively help people to follow up based on that data. So there's a sort of automation layer that looks like, okay, when was the last contact with that company? When did you say you wanted to follow up customers in a certain stage? So that you never forget to follow up, and you also never forget to respond to emails and all that. Salesforce helps with that as well.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds really interesting, and I know that CRM systems are not always good about integrating all of the information, and we all know salespeople are not as good at updating it. So if it overcomes that problem, then that's excellent. So what are the features that you're looking to continue to develop going forward? What are the new areas that you're seeing some opportunities?
Yeah, so we started very much with the data input automation because we thought that's where the main issue is. Like, if people don't fill that out, then the whole system falls apart. Now that is working, there's features in Salesforce to help you follow up and all that. Now we're building sort of automation on top of that, making sure that you can use all the data that is available. So for instance, last year we built this advanced filtering thing with which you can go through your data with all the attributes you have across entities, like don't only filter accounts by stuff on accounts, but also by the fields on opportunities and all that. So but now we are building on top of that again. Like the last big thing we released in a few months ago is email workflows. So you can use these filters to say, okay, if this and this and this and this is true, then this person needs to get that email. And then if they respond, it stops emailing them. If they don't respond, it sends another email and then maybe another one. And then, or if they click, that's all things you can define so that you can set up this sort of this automated flow of emails, which might be, for instance, when somebody signs up for your software, if you're selling software, or if somebody signs up for your list or whatever. Or it might be when a customer reaches a certain stage, or what we personally use it a lot for, as well as for outreach purposes, all kinds of purposes, like for instance, reaching out to potential partners at a bit of scale in a personalized way, because it sends from your own inbox, and it completely looks the same like an email you would have sent yourself. So, and we're sort of expanding more and more in that direction, I would say.
Excellent, excellent. So what's your sweet spot of companies for Salesflare?
In general, it's B2B companies. It's very much built around selling to companies. But if we look into who uses Salesflare the most, it's mostly agencies, which is sort of split into marketing agencies and everything related to that, and software development agencies, so companies who build software for other companies. And then on the other hand, we have a lot of fast-growing startups, tech companies. Our most recent customer is, for instance, a big TV production company. It's all companies that are actively selling or have some sort of sales process. But yeah, mostly in these two areas, I would say.
So what practical strategy could you offer listeners to enable buyers to buy that builds long-term trusted relationships?
I would say two things, perhaps. Try to get as close to your customers as you can. A lot of companies nowadays try to do the exact opposite, and they try to build a lot of barriers between them and the customer, which is unnecessary. I assure you that if you do the opposite and try to stay as close as possible, it won't be that overwhelming. Customers nowadays want a lot of independence, but they still appreciate very much when you build a close relationship. So do things like helping them in a personal way, interviewing them on how, why they're using your product or service, how you can improve it, this kind of things. Follow up with them on a consistent basis, which is something you can then, for instance, automate. You could say like, I want to reach out every 3 months to my existing customers, and you set up something that does that. That thing can be automated, but then of course, if they respond, you pick up yourself. You don't let a robot talk to them. Which is probably my second point, is try to automate things in your sales process that don't really need you as a human being. Try to automate things away that you're spending a lot of time on, but that don't really feel like you're adding a super amount of value. And that if you automate them away, that don't make you less human, if that makes sense. So easy wins is, for instance, starting to use calendar scheduling links. Nobody likes to email back and forth anymore to like 10 times to book a meeting. It's automating part of the quick follow-up emails that you're sending, making templates for these kind of things, automating your data perhaps with a CRM, automating follow-up reminders. There's a whole lot of things where you're spending time now where a computer can much better take over, but always try to do it in such a way that it doesn't automate you away in such a way that the prospect will feel bad about it and be like, what's this? Like, this doesn't make sense. This is disrespectful. Try to choose these things where it makes you more human instead of less human.
Isn't it a really fine balance when you're working in complex sales B2B?
Mm-hmm.
Is about the personal relationship. I talk about the personal business personality, and there are a lot of processes that you should and can automate, but then there's also a lot of benefit in just picking up the phone.
Yeah.
You know, or sending that kind of cheeky email with a smiley face, you know, or
Yeah.
something a little bit off the cuff that shows personality.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be long and involved. And the problem is that how do you strike that right balance so that you maintain the humanity in the process?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And those are exactly the points that I wouldn't automate. The idea of automating part of it is that you actually have more time for this, so that you can spend much more time on the human elements in the sales process and spend less time on the other things which take away your time and energy and don't really add much value in building a relationship. So the way I generally approach it is just do things manually. Like go do the whole sales process manually, automate nothing, and then it's at points you will start feeling like, okay, this thing I'm doing here, I completely understand how it's done. It can be automated without actually taking away how human I am, and then you do that, and step by step, as you go through things, apply your empathy all the time. Do it manually. Think like, oh, this sort of makes me feel like I'm a robot when I'm doing this all the time. Then automate that, but keep the things you were mentioning. They seem like things you better sort of keep to yourself and don't give that to a computer.
You've made me think of often when I go in and I'm working with companies, they have so many apps and tools, they're not using half of them. They don't know, you know, there's so much confusing and crossover. And there's one thing I do is I strip it all out and get them to do everything manually, just as you've said, so that they, every salesperson works in a slightly different way. And often there's one uniform process tool and whatever, and it doesn't work for everybody. And you kind of lose sight of really, what is this process? What are we here to do? Mm-hmm. You know, why is this really important? So completely stripping it out and just doing everything manually then they can start to tailor the processes to the things that they like to do and want to spend time on, and things that are repetitive and they don't like to do, and then go out
Exactly.
and look for the tool to automate it, or the app that you can, you know, use as a shortcut. But often what happens, they're given all of these tools and they don't use them, you know, you know, maxim out the process.
Yeah, or in the wrong way. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that
or
that
in the
makes a
wrong
lot
way.
of sense. It
Yeah.
might be at some point that you need this kind of reset button when things have grown out of control, and you're like, okay, how does this exactly look? Why do we use this and that? And you strip it all out and start from scratch. Ideally, this is not needed, but it sounds like for some people it might be needed. Yeah,
But you know,
just
like you have one sales leader and, you know, their tenure isn't that long. So it might be 18
Mhm.
months. And they bring in all their systems and tools. And
Yeah.
then that's on top of the legacy of the previous sales leader. And then
Hmm.
everyone that comes into the company has their own kind of things that they like to use. And that's how so quickly it becomes an absolute mess. Everyone's doing
Hmm.
everything in their own way and no one really understands it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
totally get that.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
So, what's one tried and tested strategy you would offer listeners to scale their sales?
Yeah. Uh, to the points I was making earlier, I think the biggest opportunity is probably in the middle of the pipeline. A lot of people like to focus either on creating new leads or closing deals, and it's always important to work on both at once and keep a balance or split out the positions, like have some people work on the one and some on the other. But then in between, that's not often talked about, like the whole process from, okay, there's a lead, we're not closing him yet, but there's this whole follow-up process in between, to work very much on that. A lot of companies lose a lot of potential there. It's just in setting up a system that works for you. So if you have to strip everything out, like you said, and then look like, okay, so this is our customer, their preferred buying process works like this. They would like to do this, then talk about us with this, then do that, and then get there, and then now map that, see what the steps are, see where all your prospects are in that process, and then start trying to sort of make that as frictionless as possible, but also in all the steps build in reminders for yourself, for like to make sure that nobody gets stuck in that process. And very essential also is to make sure that every step that you've lined out in the process is super clear in terms of next step. So within a sales pipeline, it's always very important to take people at each step to the next step. But if the next step is not 100% clear to you as a salesperson, and it's very hard to get a customer to move to the next step, because you, you don't know very well what this next step is. How can you take them to the next step? So these things are essential, and that's where a lot of value nowadays is lost in the sales pipeline, I would say.
Okay, so who is your hero or shiro?
uh, a bit cliche, but I'm an engineer by background. I like technology a lot. I like entrepreneurship. So Elon Musk is sort of like the, yeah, he does all these, not only like technology and entrepreneurship, but he works on these things that really matter, with which he believes, at least in his worldview. But I mean, I guess it's pretty close to what is actually needed. Like, how can we move this world forward? And I really admire that, I'd say.
Excellent, excellent. So, how can listeners get hold of you? What's your preferred?
Best is LinkedIn nowadays, I
Yeah,
think. There's only one person with my name, so it's pretty easy to find me. If you can spell it. But I'm sure
yeah.
you'll be able to find on the title of the episode what my name is. Please include a note because otherwise you're just a random person reaching out. Somebody wants to sell something or whatever. So write a little note that you heard this episode and we can connect.
Did I hear you right? You're the only person with your name?
Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful. I have to put a B in mine, Janice B. Gordon, to be the only person. But you know, you're a natural. Look at that.
No, I'm lucky. I have a last name that is not super common, and then my first name used to be very common, but actually it's dying out. So there hasn't been any new babies with my name in the last 3-4 years or something. So.
Maybe you need to make your own.
Yeah, that's what people say.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast. Thanks for sharing all of your insights and knowledge. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. I was glad to be on the show.